Thanks for joining us and listening to another God-lived and God-breathed message by Darius Nelms. Our mission is to increase our generation standard back to God's standard of excellence and kingdom living through personal development, relational wisdom, business management, and faith increase. Our aim is that this message inspires and infuses you to reach your next level of living and helps you discover your rightful place in God's kingdom. Now, let's dive into the message.
And know the best way to overcome that, and know what we are up against if we are to be successful and if we are to win this battle in life. So that's what this kingdom battles is all about. And the key word in it, of course, is kingdom, because that's the primary objective for anything that I ever talk about, is kingdom. Kingdom is not a religion. Kingdom is what God established in the beginning and what Jesus himself came back to reestablish. It's kingdom, the kingdom, the kingdom, the kingdom. And we'll elaborate on that. You know, I'm coming out with my third book. It's called Who Needs Religion Not Us? And it's centered around this kingdom concept, not a religious concept. So whenever we start the book club with that, of course, everybody will be in the mix with it. I'll make sure to get everybody a copy. But it'll help us understand the kingdom, because we live in a democracy. And so because we live in a democracy, it's very, very hard for us to understand kingdom concepts and the way that kingdoms work. Like it's hard for us to grasp in our logical sense, because again, we live in a democracy, capitalism and competition and all of those things, when a kingdom is the complete opposite of that. So even in the Western world, when people talk about God and talk about the life of Christ and things of that nature, it's often a little tainted because of our lack of awareness with the kingdom concept, which again is what God established in the beginning with Adam and Eve, and what Christ himself came back to reestablish, which is written in Matthew chapter 4, was that Christ said that he came back to reestablish the kingdom. So this week we're going to be talking about the flesh versus the spirit. Last week when we discussed and we talked, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat section on this link, in the Google Meet link. Drop it in the chat section, and I'll be able to read it and I'll be able to respond if you need me to repeat anything or say a verse again or whatever the case is. So feel free to drop it in the chat or kind of interrupt me however you need to. But this week we're talking about flesh versus spirit. And on the call last week, I had you write down flesh means social acceptance and spirit is God's acceptance. So next to flesh, I still want you to write social acceptance, but I want you to add something to that. I want you to add that it is self-acceptance, right? Your flesh is social acceptance and self-acceptance. And your spirit is God's acceptance, right? The flesh is your self-standard and your spirit is God's standard. And I'm going to break that down very, very good here in a minute. But I just want to start that off as a premise, because understanding kingdom battles and just the battles of life, it's always the battle of what you want to do versus what God wants you to do. Flesh versus spirit. Flesh versus spirit. It's always the battle of what you want to do versus what God wants you to do. The desire to curse someone out is to your standard. It makes you feel good. It makes you feel better. It makes you feel like you did something. But then you have a requirement on the flip side of that to be quiet, which is the response of God. So the social acceptance and the self-acceptance, when someone offends you or someone gets you out of mode and out of character, is to go off on them. It's to maybe, want to press that issue with them in some type of way. That's the social and self-acceptance. But then you have God's requirement and acceptance, which is take a walk. Just be quiet. Ignore that, because it's going to lead to more problems down the line. Oftentimes, if we were to interview the consequences of our decisions, is certain decisions that we wouldn't make. That's why being quiet is very powerful, because we'll say some things that we don't mean, or we'll say some things that probably should not be said. And we've all done it. We've all done it. But it's also a learning process as well. The battle and the desire to move and go versus the requirement to sit still in silence and meditate, right? So the flesh always wants to go. It wants to go, 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 go. Living in this capitalistic society, living in a democracy, it's always about the grind. It's always about going. Gotta go, I gotta do this, I gotta do that. Not saying not to work hard. I'm not saying not to cherish each moment and to make each moment count towards something. But there are moments when you need to sit still. That's the requirement of God. There are moments when you need to sit still. There are moments when you need to meditate, when you need to sit in silence, when you need to be honest with yourself in that silent space. A place of solidarity for you. The desire to believe what you see is the social acceptance and the self-acceptance. But the requirement of God is to believe the vision that he has given you for your future. Meaning that he'll give you the vision for your future. You'll have the dream. You'll have the desire to want to achieve more and to bring into fruition what God showed you deep down in the bellies, in the depths of your spirit and your heart, right? But then time has to play its course. And it might be 5-10 years and you looking and like, man, I know I ain't tripping. I know I'm not tripping. So then you'll begin to look at your circumstances and be like, well, maybe it's just a fluke. It's not a fluke. The time just has not come yet. Right? So the desire to believe what you see, meaning the desire to believe your surroundings and your environment and what that's telling you in comparison to what God has shown you. Right? In comparison to what God has shown you. Because there's a constant battle that leads you to mental bondage or mental freedom, right? Which leads me to ask, which side will win the battle in your life? This is a personal question. It's not anything that you have to answer out loud now. This is a personal question for you and your notes. There's a constant battle that leads you to mental bondage or mental freedom, meaning there are things in your mind that keep you bound, that keep you in the same space. And 1, 2, 3, 4 years pass by and you're still in the same mental space. And there is something that's leading you to mental freedom, meaning you break out of the shackles. You're able to evolve. You're able to transform. You're able to progress. You're able to go to that next level. So there's a constant battle that leads you to mental bondage or mental freedom. That's flesh versus spirit, right? Do you want to be flesh and bound or spirit and freedom? Right? That's what we're talking about today. Do you want to be fleshly and bound or do you want to be spiritual and free? And I'm going to break down spirit and flesh in just a second. Just bear with me. Just take that down for your notes right now. So who's openly declared war against you? We talked about the devil last week and it's a re-emphasis on he's not the devil that Hollywood makes him out to be, you know, the red-horned, pitchfork holding, emoji looking devil. That's not who the devil is. We discussed last week about the devil being the prince of the air. That's in scripture, meaning that he moves through communication streams, right? He moves by way of sound waves. He moves by way of TV, media, music, conversations. He's moving to and fro by the way of the waves, the sound waves, the ways of communication. He's the prince of the air. We talked about that last week. So when you understand that our communication in life has everything to do with waves. Everything has to do with some sort of sound wave. Me talking right now is creating a sound wave. The music that you listen to creates a sound wave. The TV and the movies and the TV shows that you watch, they create sound waves. That's how the devil moves. That's how he's able to plant seeds of doubt and seeds of imagination and desires that naturally wouldn't be inclined upon you had you not seen what you saw. That's how the devil moves. It's by way of the sound waves, social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of these different things. This is how he's able to be so effective so quick. And it's not me giving him more credit than he needs. I'm just pointing out we need to know the enemy, right? We need to know who we're up against and what we're up against so that we know how to fight. We know how to monitor. We know how to be, as we would say, woke. That work in the Hebraic tongue. And anytime you hear me say anything about the Hebrew tongue or the Hebrew language, the Greek language, Aramaic language, these are the original languages of the Bible, the transcripts, the manuscripts. So when I say it, it's to give you the original context of what that word means. So in the original Hebrew tongue, that word woke means to be aware. It just means to be aware. So are you aware of how the enemy moves, how the devil moves to distract you, to keep you bound, to keep you in mental shackles, to keep you from reaching your goal, to keep you from reaching your mark? It's almost like there's an Apple AirTag attached to you, right? And every time you walking in life and you progressing in life and you moving in life, every time you want to do good, every time you want to believe what you can't actually see in this moment, the enemy, the devil, the prince of the air, he has access to your Apple tag and he is hunting you down to make sure that you don't make it to your destination. And the fact of the matter is the logical mind, especially people that may be new and that may be trying to grasp and understand this type of concept may ask, well, why does God allow the devil to do that? That's the key point, right? God allowing it is to an extent. The devil does not have full access to you. The battles that you face are very limited. And the fact of the matter is it actually talks in scripture that your battle is already won, meaning you're already victorious. So even when you're faced with a battle, going into a battle, you should already know that you are victorious off of it. That's the kingdom mandate. I mean, that's really just the kingdom mandate. And so the devil's job is to make sure that you get off God's track and you revert back to who you used to be. But I'm here to encourage you to say that who you used to be no longer exists. There's a freedom about you that you have to embrace, but it requires spiritual principles and a disciplined approach. If you're taking notes, make sure you write that down. There's a freedom about you that you have to embrace, but there's a caveat to it. It requires a spiritual, a principled, and a disciplined approach. The devil feeds off of your flesh because he cannot touch your spirit. See, there goes that limit. There goes the limit of access. He's not touching your spirit. He can only touch your flesh. There's the limit. See, there's the boundary that God has placed in each of us. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like, your background, what you grew up believing. None of that matters. The fact of the matter is God has already put a boundary in place for everybody, to where the devil can touch your flesh, but he cannot touch your spirit. He can touch your flesh, but he cannot touch your spirit. So that's what he wants to feed off of. Because he knows that if he can get you wrapped up in your flesh, if he can get you to act out of character, he can get you to cuss that person out, and he can get you to do this and that's contrary to what you know is right and what you need to do. He already knows he has an advantage. I'll prove it to you in the most logical sense. You can write this verse down. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 33. It reads this: don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Very simple and logical verse. The beginning of that scripture says, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good characters. Some translations say good morals, good principles, things of that nature. But bad company corrupts good character. The devil feeds off of your flesh because he knows how to entice things that are bad, and he knows how to dress it up to make it look good. That's why you got to be careful. So don't be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. Your spirit is God. right? Your spirit is a threatening force. That's why people who do wrong don't want somebody who does right in the room. Think about it. In your adult age, from the time that maybe you were in college, that's why people who do wrong don't want someone who does right in the room. Because more times than not, the person that does right is go try to talk some sense into the people that do wrong. And the people that do wrong are set on doing wrong. They're set on doing wrong because their flesh is at war with your spirit. Their flesh, meaning the ability to do wrong, is at war with your spirit, your ability to do right and choose right. It's a war there. Their enslavement to flesh sees your freedom in the spirit as a problem. That's why people who do wrong does not want someone right in the room. Because their enslavement to the flesh sees your freedom in the spirit as a problem. They see it as a problem. Their enslavement to self is offended by your freedom in God. Your spirit, your positive energy, your positive aura, your smile, your brightness, your knowledge, all of those godlike traits offend those people who are always mad, who are always angry, who are always offended, always wanting to choose wrong, always wanting to do wrong. There's always a war. Their dissentious behavior is threatened by your peaceful approach. Their dissentious behavior is threatened by your peaceful approach. That's why they try to get a rise out of you. Because it's different. Because it's different. It's always a war between flesh and spirit, whether it's your flesh versus your spirit or whether it's your spirit versus somebody else's flesh. It's always a war. It's always a battle. If you're taking notes, write this down. Your flesh leads you to bondage, right? Write that point down. Your flesh leads you to bondage. That word flesh in the Greek tongue is the word sarx, where we get the English word sarcasm. They share the same root word, meaning that sarcasm is a cutting edge and it can cut to the bone, cutting through the flesh to impact the soul, right? So your flesh is led by self. Apart from God, it's generally negative and displeasing to God. This is just kind of some knowledge-based stuff right here that I'm giving you. Your flesh is led by self, apart from God, and it's generally negative and displeasing to God when you read the Bible, right? It generally results in unaided human effort, meaning that in essence, the flesh is selfish and stubborn in doing what it wants and what feels good in the moment. That's the flesh. That's something very important for you to write down. In essence, your flesh leading you to bondage means that your flesh is selfish and it's stubborn. And it's going to do what it wants and what makes it feel good. That's why I said it's unaided human effort, because it requires no effort. You are able to do bad all by yourself in the flesh. You can say what you want. You can do what you want. You can act how you want. That's the flesh. You can look down at yourself right now and touch your arm. That's your flesh. That's your flesh. It requires no effort. You are able to do bad all by yourself. And here's the key point about this particular point. Your flesh leads you to bondage. Write this down right here. I'm about to say it. This is the irrational side of man. Make sure you write that down. Your flesh leads you to bondage, meaning that it's the irrational side of you. That's why in your flesh, it's easy to cuss somebody out. Because see, they done made you mad and now your brain is shut down by 50%. So half the hemisphere of your brain ain't even working. Imagine if everybody out here was working on half a brain. I mean, sometimes it seems like people do. But nonetheless, imagine if 24/7 it seemed like people was only working on half a brain. That's the irrational side of man. Your flesh leading you to bondage is a result of it being the irrational side of you. It's the irrational side of you. Your flesh is the irrational side of you. Then the next point is your spirit leads you to freedom. Make sure you write that down. And even when you're looking at it in your notes, you will see almost like it's night and day. It's like, man, the bondage is so dark, but the freedom seems like it's light, because it is. Your spirit leads you to freedom. Make sure you write that point down. That word spirit in the Greek is the word pneuma. It means breath. It means to breathe, spirit, soul of a person. Right? And guess what? That's the rational side of you. Make sure you write that down. Your spirit leads you to freedom. It's the rational side of you. I gave you the Greek term for this word spirit. It's pneuma, because I want us to really, really grasp it and understand it. Because that word pneuma means to breathe, spirit, and soul of a person. It's the soul of a person. It's the soul of you. And you'll ask, okay, well, what does breath and breathing have anything to do with spirit? Let me tell you how God operates. Genesis chapter 2, verses 7. Write that down in your notes. Genesis chapter 2, verses 7. This is what it says. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed. There goes that word breathed. Into his nostrils the breath of life. And the man became a living being. See, that's where the Greek word pneuma comes from. It's the breath, it's the spirit, it's the soul of a person. Because God operated and created man from the dust. And his creation from the dust came by way of breathing life into him, into his nostrils, the breath of life. So your spirit is your soul. It's the innermost depths of you. Your breath gets to every crevice and part of your body. If it did not, then you would be dead right now. That's why the spirit is so important, because the spirit gives you life in every aspect. The spirit gives you life in every aspect. See, the flesh, again, which in the Greek is sarx, it's like sarcastic. Imagine if somebody says something, if your spouse says something sarcastic to you in the middle of a conversation, you gonna feel a type of way. Because you gonna ask who you getting smart with or who you talking to. Because see, sarcasm cuts you to the bone. It offends you. And it's almost like cutting through the flesh to impact the soul. That's what the flesh is. But see, the spirit is breath. It's new life. It's almost like breathing in through your nose, out through your mouth. It calms your body. It leads you in a free way. If you're taking notes, write this down as well about the spirit man. The spirit man is able to perceive and grasp divine and eternal things upon which the Spirit of God exerts its influence. In short, you're able to feel and understand divine things, the things of God. When I say that word divine, it's not to be super, super deep. I'm not saying it like that. And in its most logical sense, you're able to sense the things of God. That's all it is. And you'll say, okay, well, what are the things of God, Darius? Wisdom. Wisdom is a thing of God. Discernment is a thing of God, right? All of these things are very, very logical. Very, very logical. Your spirit man is able to discern earthly wisdom from godly wisdom. Your spirit is able to discern the energy in the room, right? Your spirit is able to discern hidden hate that's given in the form of love. These are things of God. These are things of God. This is another thing for you to write down about your spirit. It's the highest and most noble part of you. Write that down. You can't miss that. Your spirit is the highest and the most noble part of you. The highest form of yourself is your spirit. It's the most noble part of you. It's the most innocent part of you. See, because your spirit gives you the power to feel, to think, to have a will, to decide, and to feel it in your soul, in the innermost depths and parts of you. Because remember, God breathed life into man. Breathing gives you life, literally and figuratively. You cannot miss that. Breath and breathing gives you life, literally and figuratively. If all of us on this call right now, as a matter of fact, I went swimming this morning. I was a part of a deep end fitness class today, and we really we were in a 13-foot pool, and we had to always swim down to the bottom and come back up. If I would have stayed underneath that water and held my breath, I would not be here on this call with you today. Because breath literally gives me life in a very, very literal sense and in a spiritual sense. Don't miss that, because your spirit is the most rational side of you. So about this kingdom, right? Kingdom battles. I keep talking about kingdom. And again, whenever we start the book club and we talk more in depth, it's going to make so much sense to you. And I hope it's making sense to you now. But the kingdom is that of a spiritual government, right? It's not a religion. The kingdom of God, of heaven, is a mental disposition and awareness of governance over a territory, meaning this earth/secondary location. If you're taking notes, make sure you write that down. The kingdom is a mental disposition. The kingdom is an awareness of governance over a territory, understanding that the earth is God's. He's given it to us to manage. Right? The earth is the Lord's. He's given it to us to manage. If you were on the call last week, you heard my little story, the little story I wrote. The first business that God ever created was the heavens and the earth. The secondary business, the flagship location, was the earth. The first business, the headquarter location, is the heavens, the invisible realm. The atmospheric realm. That's what he created first. And then he looked down and he said, man, all of this is good, but I want to create a secondary location. I want to create earth. And I want people, I want humans to manage it on my behalf. By my government standard, by my kingdom standard. Because remember, a kingdom is not only a business, but it is a government. And a government has laws. A government has a constitution. A government has a judicial system. A government system has a financial system. A government system has societal norms and expectations. Think about our democratic society. Don't we have all of those things? In the same way, the kingdom and kingdoms have these things. Because the kingdom is a tangible form of government. It's a government and political position and purpose. Make sure you write that down if you're taking notes. I'm going to break that down for you. The kingdom is a tangible form of government, and it's a government and a political position and purpose. And you'll ask why. The logical mind will ask why. Because government and politics influence society, and God knew this from the jump. Government and politics influence society. That's why when we view God, one of the ways that we view God and that we have to understand God is that of a political and government standard. Being in the United States, we have a president, right? We have a president. But in a kingdom, there is no president. There is no prime minister. There is none of that. In a kingdom, it is what? A king or a queen. But in this instance, it is a king, and the king is God. See, because in a democracy, we get to cast our vote about what we want our country to do, what policies we want in place, and this, that, and the other. We get to share our opinion. But in a kingdom, what the king says is the law. The king is not, as citizens don't vote in a kingdom. That's what's important. Citizens don't vote in a kingdom. It's What God says is the law. Because we have to understand that government and politics influence society, not religion of any sort. That's why a lot of over 95% of the countries in the entire world are in disarray and chaos because everybody's sharing their opinion versus just following one law, right? God knew this. That's why he said, you know what? The more people there is that's trying to give opinions, the more dysfunction there's going to be in the world. Therefore, I have to establish a kingdom, especially in the spiritual sense, where one person makes the decision, establishes the law, and the people and the citizens carry it out, right? But see, that's why God said that he needs your mind, because your mind will affect your heart. God can change your heart under the condition that you give him your mind. Write that down if you're taking notes. God can change your heart under the condition that you give him your mind. So when you think of God or there being a God out there, think of the kingdom. That's all you have to do. When you think, man, I know it's a God out there. You sure right about it. Think of a kingdom. Think of the kingdom. The government, the governmental and political side of God. He established himself that way. Because you're dealing with a king and a father. Because we cannot look at God in a singular fashion. Because to do that is to rob your experience with God and with the God that you say that you believe in. So as there is an external government for your mental disposition, God places that external government on the inside of you as an internal government system. Don't miss that. That was a lot, and I'm going to say it again, and I'm going to say it very, very slow so you can get it. And then we're going to move on to the thrust of our call today. We cannot look at God in a singular fashion. Because if we just look at God one way, that's a disservice. So as there is an external government for your mental disposition, meaning the kingdom, right? That's the external government, the external spiritual government for you to align yourself with. And God places that kingdom government, that external government, God places that kingdom on the inside of you as your internal government system. So inside and out, that government system is working for you, meaning that no matter who's in office in our Western world, no matter what policies are put in place, none of that affects you because you already have a government system working inside of you, which is the kingdom's government system. Meaning it don't matter who's in office and what they say and what they do and what laws they put in place. There's already an internal government system working inside of you. And that's the kingdom's government system. Meaning God's way of thinking, God's logic, God's idea for your living. It doesn't matter what's going on out there. There's already something inside of you that's working, pushing you in a positive direction. So there are a couple of verses we're going to read to really, really set up the framework for today's call. Give me about 35 minutes and I'm going to wrap up. Galatians chapter 5, write that down. Verses 1, okay? Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. Then put a comma and put verses 7 through 9. Put another comma and put verses 12 through 18. And then put one more comma and put verses 24 through 25. Seems like a lot, but I'm going to break it down to you verse by verse. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, verse 7 through 9, verses 12 through 18, and verses 24 through 25. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop your questions in the chat, and I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. So here is what it says. Let me get to it on my end. Give me 1 second. All right. I'm getting it up right now. Galatians chapter 5. Okay. So Galatians chapter 5, verses 1 says, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. Right? Then we'll go down to verse 7 through 9. And it reads this: you are running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. A little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. And I am confident in the Lord that you will take no other view. The one who is throwing you into confusion, whoever that may be, will have to pay the penalty. Verses 12 through 18. Then it says, as for those agitators, I wish that they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit. There goes that war. And the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Verses 24 through 25 says this: those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. It's a lot, but I'm going to break it down to you verse by verse. When we really focus on verses 7 through 8, right? I'm going to read verses 7 through 8 again so that we can understand it as I talk about it. Verse 7 through 8 says this: you are running a good race. You're running a race. We're running this race in life, this marathon, as Nipsey Hussle would say. We're running this marathon in life. Then it says, who cut in on you from keeping you from obeying the truth? That kind of persuasion does not come from the one who calls you. Okay. So on your journey to better, there's always someone or something trying to keep you and hold you back, right? There's someone looking to keep you and hold you back. Someone in the physical space and someone in the spiritual space. Someone holding on to the past version of you, right? Not accepting the fact that you have evolved and that you are growing. And I'm here to tell you that those people must get cut off the knees from dealing with you. Verse 7 says you were running a good race. Who cut in on you to keep you from obeying the truth? You're on a path and on a marathon to the highest form of self. Your spirit, man, the most noblest part of you. You are on a path to better, yet there is something or someone holding you back from reaching that destination. There's someone in the physical space, whether it's a friend group, sometimes in some cases it's a spouse, it's parents, it's a cousin, it's somebody that's trying to hold you from leaving them. Meaning that you are looking to progress and move in a forward and an upward direction, yet they want to stay stagnant in where they are. Because they are not accepting the fact that you are evolved and that you are growing. Because although people struggle with change and accepting change, your commitment is to your self-growth, and you cannot be responsible for how people respond or handle that. Make sure you write that down. Your commitment is to your self-growth. You're on this marathon. You're on this journey. And your commitment is to self. Not in a selfish way, but you can be selfish when it comes to being the highest form of yourself. Meaning that if it does not serve a purpose to getting you to your finish line, you have a right to make the decision to not entertain it. Because again, people struggle with change. They struggle with accepting change. You may be changing and evolving, and someone or something may be opposed to that. Therefore, they're cutting in on your race. to keep you from headed toward that upward direction, headed toward that direction of elevation. And it is your responsibility to cut those people off at the knees. I didn't say cut them off. I said cut them off at the knees, meaning that they don't have the same access to you in this growth process that you're in, because you have boundaries in your life. Because you can be committed to your self-growth and you are not responsible for how people respond or handle that. That is their problem and their battle to deal with. Because we owe no man nothing but to love him. Make sure you write that down. We owe no man nothing but to love him. Because their version of you is outdated. Because when you are committed to the highest form of self, your software update happens daily. Make sure you write that down. Your software update happens daily. Your software update happens every single day. It happens daily. That's something that's holding you back. Could be old patterns, old habits, old temptations, old routines. I'll prove it to you. Romans chapter 12, verses 2. Right? Because you're getting a software update every single day. When you look in the mirror and you say, you know what, I'm committed to being the best version of myself, the highest version of myself. Once you make that declaration, you will basically declare war on yourself. Meaning that the devil see you, he see how you moving. He said, no, I want to keep them doing the same negative, toxic stuff that they've been doing, the same trauma that they've been dealing with. I want them to keep dealing with it because it fuels my agenda. I want them to keep dealing with it. I want them to keep dealing with it. But guess what? There's a software update that's happening in you daily because you've made the commitment and the declaration that you are going to reach the highest form of self. Romans chapter 12, verse 2 says this: do not conform to the pattern of this world, of this cosmos, of what the world is made up of, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. See, the key word in this entire verse, Romans chapter 12, verse 2, is that word renewing. Because it has ing at the end of it, which means it's continuity. It's a continuous process. It's a daily process. That means that it's always happening. There are no days off when it comes to renewing your mind because it's happening every day. Your software is being updated every single day. So when it comes to you running your marathon and running your race, you have to be aware at who's cutting in on you from reaching your prize, from reaching your goal of being the highest form of self. Then verses 9 through 10, we're going to jump down to verses 9 through 10. It says, a little yeast works through the whole batch of dough. Then he says, I am confident in the Lord that you will take no other view. The one who is throwing you into confusion, whoever that may be. See, because it's out in the open now. Will have to pay the penalty. Verses 9 through 10. Yeast is very subtle to dough. Make sure you write that down. And I know I have a very prominent chef on this call. Her name is Chef Carla. And she understands yeast and dough. Yeast is subtle to dough. Yeast is very quiet, yet yeast is effective. Yeast is quiet, yet yeast is effective. Yeast sneaks up on a dough as a snake sneaks up on its prey. In other words, be careful of who you expose your heart and your mind to. Because remember, we read Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23 last week that read, above all things, guard your heart. For everything you do flows from it. You have to be careful and guard yourself from who you expose your heart and your mind to, because you always have to pay attention to yourself because people can influence you so quietly. Don't miss that. That's why yeast is subtle to dough. That's why he made a little yeast works through a whole batch of dough, because it just takes a little bit of influence and persuasion to change you for the worst. Influence is also known as persuasion or social influence. Make sure you write that down. Influence is also known as persuasion or social influence. You always have to pay attention to yourself because people can influence you very quietly in a negative way. And of course, that goes the same way positively, right? But in this case, we're talking about who cut in on you from running your good race. So in this case, we're talking about it from the negative standpoint. Something a person says can be a little remnant of something that grows. We learned this when we did our Kingdom Hearts and Desire series. Genesis chapter 3, where the enemy was sowing seeds of doubt. It was a little doubt, but it was enough to grow to make Eve be curious enough to see and know if God was withholding something from them. Right? To make sure and understand that a little remnant of something grows. So you could be having a conversation and it's small little things that people are saying. And now it's kind of, you are accepting that. And now it's taking root in your heart. And now you starting to believe it. Right? So something a person says can be a little remnant of something that grows. Be careful who you have conversations with. Be careful in the company you keep. If you have volume 2 of Your Morning Coffee, this is something that I wrote in there. I wrote, let something sit in the sun for too long and it's bound to affect its condition. Expose yourself to certain things and expect certain things in your life to be affected and changed. Again, this can be good or bad, but from this particular instance, we're talking about the bad. Because the effect of something on you isn't noticed until you are removed from that environment, whether good or bad. Once yeast gets a hold of dough, there is no letting go. Make sure you write that down. Once yeast gets a hold of dough, there is no letting go. Because once that yeast grab a hold of that dough, that dough go rise. It's going to rise. So what environment or people are affecting you negatively? That's a question for you to answer in your own personal time. What environment or people are affecting you negatively? Who's cutting in on your race? Because remember, verse 7 says you were running a good race, which meant that it's in the past tense. You were running a good race. Now you're not running such a good race. What happened? Who cut in on you from reaching the highest form of self? Who is it that's disrupting your walk, your peace, your thought process, your heart posture? Who's disrupting that? Who's disrupting you from reaching the highest form of self? Who keeps pulling you back into old patterns, habits, and routines that you have made a commitment to abandon? Who's cutting in on your race? Because remember, yeast is very subtle. It's very quiet. And once it grabs a hold to that dough, it won't let go. And once negative things enter your heart, it's not going to let go. It's going to take a bunch of diligent effort for it to let go. So I think that the encouragement and the encouragement that I'm giving to all of us, including myself, is that we have got to guard our hearts. Because our heart affects our mind. And again, once our mind is contaminated, now the heart is almost no good. That's why God said, I can change your heart, but I can't change your mind, because God is never going to usurp your right to make a choice. And the place where you make your choices is in your mind. God says, as long as you can make your choice, I'm going to honor that, whether I like it or not. So when we jump down to verse 12 says, and as for those agitators, I wish that they would go the whole way and emasculate themselves. Oh, that's good. For the people that's causing you to stumble, that's causing you to revert, it's better for them to go and emasculate themselves. See, God is not the author of confusion. Make sure you write that down. God is not the author of confusion. So if you are in a constant state of confusion and dysfunction, that will reveal to you that the root and source of it is not from God. So if you are in relationships, friendships, whatever the case is, and it's always constant confusion and dysfunction, things of that sort, understand that the root of it ain't God. Because God is all about communication, peace, order, right? He's about all of that. He's not the author of confusion. So if you're in a constant state of confusion and dysfunction, that will reveal to you that the root and the source of it is not from God. And that right there should be a red flag. There should be some adjusting and some changing that happens because you know that it's not from God. Because again, God is a God of peace, clarity, and communication. Because it's a personal path. It's a personal path. Not only is your walk with God a personal path, it's also a protective path. Based on the principle that God is showing us based off of this. They can go the whole way and emasculate themselves. He's showing us in the whole sense, in the whole way, that those that throw you into confusion and that cause you to stumble will have to pay the penalty. That right there should make you feel good. Especially when you're looking to reach the highest form of self. That should make you feel good. Because even if you stumble at the hands of something or someone else, meaning you doing everything you can to walk the right path and you keep getting tempted and somebody keep pressing you and causing you to revert or trying to get you to revert, but you fighting it the whole time. Feel good about yourself because God is taking it so personal, right? That he will mark it against that person, that spirit, or that thing that caused you to stumble. Take pride in that. If you are on the call to better, if you are on the road to positivity, if you are running this good marathon of reaching the highest form of self, and you out here battling day to day in life, understand and know that with your fight, if someone causes you to stumble and causes you to get out of character and you resisted the urge to get out of character, yet they keep pressing you and you just finally snap and they get the good cussing that you've been wanting to give them anyways. But see, you've been trying to do right. You've been trying to do right. And you've been trying to let them make it. And then when they finally cause you to just give in, understand that ain't against you. That ain't against you. God said, I'm going to mark it against them. Because God is saying, I see you walking that walk. I see you trying to run the good race. You're doing everything you can to run that good race. And whoever caused you to stumble, don't worry about them. I got that covered for you. Write this down. Mark chapter 9, verses 42. Mark chapter 9, verses 42. It says, if anyone causes one of these little ones, those who believe in me, to stumble, it would be better for them if a large millstone were hung around their neck and they were thrown into the sea. That's a murder for hire called by Jesus. That's what Christ said. Look. Jesus just put a hit out on whoever trying to set you up. I'm just putting it to you like that. That should make you feel good. It don't matter where you come from, what you grew up believing. None of that matters. Understand and know that from a spiritual sense, if somebody causes you to stumble, I see you laughing, Julian. Jesus putting a hit on some people. See, because he said, if anyone causes one of the ones that believe in me to stumble, meaning that the people that believe in me are trying to become the highest form of self. They are striving to do the right thing. They striving to say the right things. They striving to live the best that they can live. If you cause them to stumble, it will be better for them if a large millstone were hung around their neck and they were thrown into the depths of the sea. As a matter of fact, I'm going to give it to you even better. In the King James Version, it says this, and whoever shall offend. So we went from making somebody stumble to just being offended. Oh, man, that's a 2-for-1 special. That's a 2-for-1 special. So not only Are you covered if somebody actually makes you stumble? But you're also covered if someone offends you, if they make you feel a type of way. Because you're pure in heart. Meaning, you're doing what's in the best interest, not only of you, but of those that are around you. And so for someone to intentionally offend you and do you wrong, oh man, it's better for them to tie a huge rock around their neck with a chain and to just go jump in the ocean and don't come back up for air. Murder for hire. Man, that's almost like if someone was picking on you in school and you defended yourself by fighting and they suspend you. Would you be in trouble with your parents? Or would your parents still defend you because of because they cause a ruckus with the school administration and the other kids' parents? Because it's the same thing for God. Your shortcoming was covered because of someone else making you stumble. Somebody bullying you and you fight back and you lay them out. That ain't on you. They can suspend you all you want. That's fine. But guess what? 10 times out of 10, if your parent is a good parent, they ain't even tripping on you. They proud that you defended yourself. And they finna go raise some havoc with the school administration, with the other kids' parents. They probably gonna get on social media nowadays and Facebook and talk about you. It's gonna be a whole thing. It's the same exact thing. It's the same exact thing. And then we'll jump down to verse 13 and I'll wrap up with verse 13. So if you can give me another 10 minutes, I'll wrap up with verse 13. And we still have a couple of more verses that we'll get to, but I'll get into that next week. Okay. I'll get into that next week. Verse 13 reads this. It says, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather serve one another humbly in love." Then verse 14 says, "For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command. Love your neighbor as yourself. If you bite and devour each other, watch out or you will be destroyed by each other. Love others as you love yourself." Right? That's what this sums up to say. It's talking about loving your neighbor. Love others as you love yourself would suggest, make sure you write this down in your notes, that we must love ourselves well in order to love others well. Make sure you write that down. Loving others as you love yourself would suggest, by kingdom standard, that we must love ourselves well enough in order to love other people well. See, because we often say, and we throw that word love around so much, whether it's in a romantic sense or whether you just telling a friend that you love them or somebody that you've encountered multiple times, "Hey man, I love you, bro." However you say it. We throw that word love around so much that we really don't understand the implications and the expectations that come with that word. Because see, that word love in the context of the Greek tongue is the word agapo, which is the type of love, which is the highest form of love. I'm sorry about that. It's the highest form of love. So when you're becoming the highest form of self, you naturally attract the highest form of love, because that agapo love is the love that God has for us. See, the love that God has for us is an agapo type of love, right? Meaning that his love for us was so high that he was willing to sacrifice some things to display and to show his love toward us. That agapo love is the highest form of love. So when you reach the highest form of self, next you couple it with the highest form of love. When you're on the road to reaching the highest form of self, you have got to couple it with the highest form of love, which is I have to love myself well and so good and so deep so that I can love others well, so good and so deep, right? Because see, that agapo type of love is the love of God. That's God's standard. That's what he prefers. There's a quote that says this: "Look at a man the way he is and he only becomes worse. But look at him as if he were what he could be, then he becomes what he should be." That's a wonderful quote. I'm going to read it one more time. I'm going to read it one more time for you. Look at a man the way he is, and he only becomes worse. But when you look at him as if he were what he could be, meaning the potential of him, then he becomes what he should be. Meaning that agape type of love is you're loving somebody based off of their potential. You're loving somebody because you love yourself based off your potential. See, we often judge ourselves by our intent, and we often judge people by their actions. See, we judge ourselves. Oh, I didn't mean it like that. See, we judge ourselves based off of our intent. Yet the receiver is going to judge us based off of our action and say, well, I really don't care what you intended. This is what you actually did or said. You understand that? That is paramount. That's paramount because that highest form of love based off of, and the quote that I read didn't even come from the Bible, but it parallels so well because it's saying that you have to love people and someone for their potential, not based off of who they are. Now, that don't mean that you have to necessarily reconcile and that you have to continue cycles and negative traits and habits with people that refuse to change. It's not suggesting that. But it's saying in your heart, you have a love, even if you have to walk away from them and you guys have to go your separate ways. It means that you have a love for them to become the highest form of self. The same way you have love for yourself to become the highest form of yourself. See, because this type of love, this agape type of love, gives you sympathy for a lot of people. Because you recognize their lostness and their potential for greater does exist. They just aren't walking in it. They just aren't walking in it. So even when we read verses 15, Galatians chapter 5, verse 15, it says, if you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. That word bite in the Greek is the word dakno, right? Which means to thwart or prevent someone from doing something. It doesn't mean Mike Tyson biting the ear off. It's not talking about that type of bite. See, this is why when I study and I'm able to present everything to you guys, I have to read it in its original language because, see, this changes the whole meaning of the verse. It don't mean that we finna be out here Mike Tyson people, biting ears off with a reputation of biting ears off. That's not what it's saying here. It's saying if you bite... I see you laughing, Heaven. If you bite and you devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. Because again, that word bite in the Greek is the word dakno, which means to prevent someone from doing something. So our objective for each other should be only iron sharpening out iron, not preventing somebody from doing something, especially when it's beneficial for the highest form of themselves. See, we just talked about it earlier. We just said it's someone or something that's cutting in on your race, on your marathon, right? It's someone cutting in on that. And that's not the kingdom principle. The kingdom principle is iron sharpens iron. That's a verse in Proverbs. Iron sharpens iron as one person sharpens another. You have to hang around like-minded people. You have to hang around people who sharpen you for the better so you can go out there and you can be cutting and slaying and hitting your goals. Right? That word bite means to prevent someone from doing something. Because our objective should only be iron sharpening iron. We should not be agitating and being negative or tearing each other down in any type of way. And then in that same verse, give me 3 or 4 minutes and I'm done. In that same verse, it says, if you bite and devour. See, that word devour in the Greek means to bring to ruin. Right? It means to bring to ruin, to bring to nothing, to dismantle you to nothing. It means to bring you to nothing. So it's saying that if you bite, aka if you prevent someone from reaching the highest form of self, and you devour, aka you bring them to ruin and to nothing, watch out, or both of you will be destroyed. See, that's what negative people don't understand. That your negativity just ain't affecting me. It's affecting you. It's rotting your heart. It's causing disdain in your life. It's causing you to not be happy with yourself when you by yourself. That's what negativity does. Negativity don't just affect the person that's receiving it. It affects the person that's giving it. So to love you is to build you up. See, that's a key point in love, no matter who it's with, whether it's your friend, whether it's your mama, whether it's your husband or your wife, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, your fiance, it does not matter. To love you is to build you up. And if you are not building me up, and if I'm not building you up, what are we doing? Why are we friends? Why are we in a relationship? Why do we talk to each other? Because to love you is to build you up, not to bring you down. Because this highlights people who are assets for your living versus people who are liabilities. Make sure you write that down. This highlights people who are assets for your living versus people who are liabilities. So my question for you is, who builds you up in your life? Can you look to your right, to your left, to your front, and to your back and see people that build you up? And then the flip side of that is, who brings you down? Can you look to your left, to your right, to your front, and to your back and see anybody around you who brings you down to the lowest form of yourself? And don't only think that I'm talking about other people, because I'm going to come and sit in your living room too. Who do you build up? Who do you build up? And I'm not talking about building people up with toxic positivity. And for those that don't know what toxic positivity is, that's almost like a non-genuine approach toward positivity. Who do you build up? Do you tear others down? Can you be honest with yourself and ask yourself these hard questions? Who do you build up? Who do you build up in your life, on your day-to-day journey, in your race? Who are you building up? Do you tear people down? With your words? With your actions? With your attitude? Who do you build up? Who do you tear down? Who builds you up? Who brings you down? Because again, to devour and to bite one another means that we're preventing each other from reaching the highest form of self, and we're bringing each other down to a negative space, to a space that none of us want to be in. So that's it for today's call. I did have a couple of more points, but I'll just continue on with that next week. I appreciate everybody for being on the call. Does anybody have any questions before we get off? Any questions or comments or anything that needs to be cleared up before we get off? Okay, if that's all, if you have anything in your own study time based off of the notes, if you have anything that I need to clear up, please reach out to me however you need to. You know I got you. We'll rap, we'll talk game, and we will be on call again next Sunday. So thank you guys for taking time out your Sunday. Thank you for giving me an hour and 10 minutes of your time. Y'all have a good Sunday, and if y'all need anything, feel free to reach out to me. I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.
May the Lord bless you, keep you, and make his face shine upon you. As we abide in his grace, presence, and peace, remember that you are an agent of change wherever your feet shall tread. Thanks for listening to this message and for the opportunity to teach and lead you. Until next time.